Hi everyone, and welcome to this fifth episode in our Christmas Carol GCSE revision series. If you haven't been on this channel before, basically what we do here is we give you all of the key quotes, model paragraphs, character analysis, theme analysis, basically stuff you need to pass your exams and to do the best, not just pass them, but to do the best that you can in the exams. Over the last few weeks, we've covered Scrooge, the ghosts, the Cratchits, and Fred. So if you haven't seen those videos before, consider checking those out if you need a bit of help with any of those characters, or if you just need a bit of a revision session before you go into these exams. Today, we are going to hop over to themes, and we're going to look at the theme of transformation. We're going to do something a little bit different than normal today as well. So normally what I do is I talk about what transformation is, or what the theme is, what the character is, what they do, that sort of thing. I figured with transformation, it's so obvious that transformation is the cornerstone of the novel or novella, right? Like the whole thing is about Scrooge coming in to go from this miserly old man and to take it from this miserly old man into being this character that actually likes Christmas, is generous, has changed his ways. The entire novella is about transformation. So I figured rather than focusing in on what transformation is, which is kind of obvious with this, if you've ever read the novella, you know what transformation is in the novella. Instead of focusing on that, I thought it would be really cool to go through a model full essay today. So normally we go through, we talk about some key quotes, things like that, and then I give you a model paragraph. Today we're going to do a whole model essay, right? So I will put in the description of this video where the essay came from, just to credit that source. It is just openly on the internet. I thought it was fantastic when I came across it. Before I read the essay and explain why it's so good, I thought what would be cool is to just talk about the quotes that the student had used. So in the essay, she has used this quote here: a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. So that's one of the quotes she discusses and analyzes. As light as a feather, as happy as an angel, I'm quite a baby. That's another quote she uses. Heavy coil she uses. Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? She uses. She might use another quote or two in there, but those are four of the major quotes which she bases her essay on transformation on. Now, the other thing, actually, I didn't do a slide for this, but I'm going to make one quickly with you. I just need you to understand when you're writing these essays. I've sort of briefly mentioned this before, but I think it's useful to spend a couple minutes here. You want to use different exam boards will have slightly different orders of this, but effectively these are the same skills that you need to use regardless of which exam board you're seeing. The ones I'm using specifically are for AQA, but whether you're sitting AQA, EdXL, OCR, GCSE of some sort, like Cambridge, Woodgick, whatever, these are the things you still need to do. You might just have a slightly different name for them. So assessment objective 1, basically you need solid ideas and points, and you need to show that you really understand the text. Now, this information that I'm giving you here is also relevant for all of your literature. So whether we're talking about Christmas Carol, which is a Victorian novel, or Shakespeare play, whether you're doing Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, something like that, or looking at a different Victorian novel like Jekyll and Hyde or something, or modern texts, so Lord of the Flies and Spectacles, etc., etc. This is still relevant. If you haven't checked out my videos on any of those texts, I would also highly recommend that you do that. So AO1, solid ideas and points, show a good understanding of the text. AO2, break down relevant quotes, explain how they prove your points. AO3 is thinking about context relevant to your ideas. And then AO4 is what we colloquially call QWC, which stands for the quality of written communication. So basically how well you've actually written the essay in terms of, is it well organized? Is it well punctuated? Is it spelt well? Do you use good vocab choices? All that sort of stuff. Okay, cool. It's all crazy right now. Anyway, whatever. So as we're reading this essay, what I want you to understand is that she has done all of these things exceptionally well. What you might be surprised is how few quotes she has used relatively. She's only used 4 or 5 quotes, but what she's done is she's broken down the quotes into such good detail in her analysis in her AO2 that that's why this is honestly a solid level 9 essay. Okay, so let's start reading. And I'll just give you some comments as we read, just to show you things that I'm seeing, thinking as an examiner, things that I'm rewarding her for in my head to get her to pretty much 40 out of 40, honestly, like 38, 39 or 40 out of 40, this essay. So Dickens utilizes Scrooge in order to illustrate how self-centered, insensitive people can be converted into liberal, compassionate, and socially conscious individuals. Benevolence and generosity overcome Scrooge's hostile apathy as he realizes his responsibility to look after the less fortunate. At first, Scrooge is delineated as the worst man in London to show that even those with the most negative personas are capable of flourishing into better individuals. Dickens does this to show the bourgeoisie of his Victorian audience that they too need to seek redemption by supporting the proletariat and completing more charitable deeds, as this simple change could have a rippling effect in society. Wow, so it's a fantastic introduction. Now I'm going to be totally honest, my normal advice to students is probably not to write an introduction. There's nothing in the mark scheme that specifically says that you need to do this. But if you do have time to do this after planning your essay, what it does do really well is a lot of AO1. What this shows is that this student really understands the text. She has introduced multiple points, which I assume she's then going to talk about in the rest of the essay. So she's talked about this transformation, of course, from a self-centered, insensitive person into a liberal, compassionate, socially conscious one. She's talked about how Scrooge's apathy at the beginning becomes a responsibility as he realizes and becomes conscious of the less fortunate. And then she's also done a starting point. I'm going to put this in little bracket, a little text, because it's introducing the context she'll use. She hasn't fully introduced the context yet, but she's explained how the context here is going to be used. It's the novel, is a way of trying to convince the upper class Victorians, which is the bourgeoisie, that's the upper class, to help the proletariat, that is the working class, effectively. Yeah, so this class division is being shown. She doesn't go any deeper into AO3 just yet. Okay, so let's dive into the essay. At the beginning of the novella, Scrooge is presented as a cold-hearted miser. This is evident when it's, so straight away, nice, clear, relevant AO1, nice, clear point to begin. Same as I've taught you in every other lesson. Nice, clear point, specific point at the beginning. So presented as a cold-hearted miser. It's evident when he says, oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. So this is a well-chosen quote. The narrative O suggests that even the narrator is overwhelmed by how unpleasant he is. This is just fantastic analysis. So obviously the narrative voice here is being shown to have a bit of surprise, even in the character that it is describing. The adjectives are linked semantically by a link with the hand. This shows how tightly he held on to things. So tight-fisted, grindstone, squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching. All of these verbs suggest something to do with gripping with the hand. So it shows his greed, right? Very perceptive. In his single-minded focus on acquiring wealth, Scrooge represents the opposite of generosity in every way imaginable. In his business dealings, he constantly tries to squeeze money out of people, grasps and scrapes for more benefits for himself, and covets what he does not yet have. So this is a really interesting way that she's breaking down the words. So notice that she's not explaining what the words do exactly. She's explaining what imagery comes to her mind from the words. So really going deep into AO2, really analysing deeply how this shows Scrooge's initial greed and cold-heartedness. The negative verbs all have an onomatopoeic feel associated with lacking liberty. They have a guttural quality and are harsh and unpleasant in their sound, like Scrooge. So squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching. They're all quite harsh words. That's what she's saying here. So she's talking about the phonology, which again is even deeper analysis. The list emphasizes Scrooge's negative qualities to the point where he becomes a caricature of greed. Again, just a fantastic point. A caricature is like, you know, you might have seen when there's a picture of someone's face, but it's kind of made cartoonish, and normally one of the features is exaggerated. So like for me, I'd maybe have like big ears, or I don't know, like they just make your face look cartoony. So the idea that Scrooge is a caricature for greed is also really perceptive analysis. In addition, the utilization of exclamation marks could amplify our disgust at him. Great. So she's talking a little bit about structure here as well. She's talked about the list. Now she's talked about the exclamation marks. Alternatively, it is quite conspicuous that there are 7 verbs listed. Perhaps this could be symbolic of the 7 deadly sins, avarice in particular. So if you want to get to level 9, what you want to be doing is trying to set yourself apart from other students. I've mentioned that before in other videos. I think that this is a particularly perceptive idea. The fact there are 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 could link to the 7 deadly sins, especially because the novella was written at a time when most people were Christian or Catholic. And so the 7 deadly sins would have been something that was even more commonly thought about. And it's just such a long list, it's unusual. Dickens has done this to show the reader that Scrooge is in desperate need for a transformation in order to stop him from being condemned in the afterlife. So there's some reader response in there, which I always tell you is a good thing, particularly thinking about AO3, which is your context. So just remember that context can be the context of production. So the fact that this was produced in Victorian England, Industrial Revolution, Dickens' own life. You can talk about the way, the environment which it was produced, but also reception. So the way that the audience would have thought and felt at the time. So the fact that they were a Victorian audience, quite traditional and conservative, especially compared to today. They'd have seen the struggle of the working class or proletariat, as this student has said. They would have probably received it as a piece that challenged the views of the bourgeoisie, the upper class, right? And talking about an afterlife, it would have been received that way more because, as I said, Victorians were more of a Christian community in England at the time. He may have presented Scrooge as such in order to shock readers out of their inertia. It isn't enough to just read passively, but it's important for Dickens to have an impact for change to occur in society. Okay, so great paragraph. The only thing I'd have liked to see a bit more, if I'm being super picky, is a bit more context. But obviously we did have some starting points of context here. And there's a nice bit of reader response, which does link to AO3 in here. So that's good. All right, next paragraph. Doing perfectly good on time so far, so that's great. So towards the middle of the novella, Scrooge is starting to transform as he realizes his wrongdoings. This is seen when it says, "Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?" The spirit reminds Scrooge of his own words at the start of the novella. Dickens is showing us that Scrooge has already begun to change as he is viewed of having said it. This could also make the readers regret their stubborn views too. So that's another little context point. We could go a bit further into that, but she's about to do that. At first, Scrooge could be seen as a supporter of Thomas Malthus, an economist who argued that poverty was the inevitable result of overpopulation. He believed that the increase in population would overtake the development of sufficient land for crops and diminish the ability of the world to feed itself. However, Dickens believed that these ideologies were wrong and that there was plenty of food to go around, but only if the rich were more generous. He thought it was to share. It was wrong that the poor should suffer because the rich were too selfish to share. Now that Scrooge is able to see his mistakes, he will change his views and become more magnanimous. Dickens highlights the importance of generosity and charity as the Industrial Revolution created a society in which the gap between the rich and the poor had significantly increased. In the 1840s, around 75% of people lived hand to mouth, which means they earned just enough to survive. Those struggling to survive in extreme poverty relied on the liberty of those better off than themselves. Dickens aimed to reach out to the wealthy and teach them to accept their social responsibility to look after the less fortunate. Okay, so this one here, we have just a ton of very detailed AO3. So this ticks all of those AO3 context marks, right? We've got about Malthus, who was an economist. We've got about the Industrial Revolution. We've got about the working class of the 1840s and statistics to back that up. This is very detailed, in-depth context. Now, I'll be honest, in the way that I recommend writing the essay, I would have broken this context up into several places throughout the essay, but everything that she says here does flow from this idea of Scrooge saying that poverty is almost like a crime, and why don't the poor just go to workhouses? So I can see why she's written this big chunk here, but I would encourage you probably to put this detail of context in, but one bit at the end of each of your main paragraphs. This is a very 803 heavy paragraph, but the reason that that's good for me to show you as well is this is how you do it. This is how you write about context. Maybe not in a huge chunk like this, but overall, this is really high level 9 context included. And hopefully you've learned something from reading this, or maybe if you knew all this context, look at how beautifully she's written this. Very, very well written. If I'm being picky, which I'm going to be, that's my whole prerogative, I would say I would like to see a little bit more AO2 to balance this out a bit more. So the transformation is happening. He talks about, are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Reminding Scrooge of this. I would probably have added a reaction here from Scrooge, the fact that Scrooge is devastated when the ghost says his own words back to him. He's ashamed at what he's said. I think that that helps to just emphasize the transformation a bit more. But we've also got to remember you have 50 minutes to write this essay, so there's going to have to be some compromises somewhere. So yeah, there's a load of really good 803 in this paragraph. All right, so now we're into the final main paragraph, and then we have a little sort of concluding idea as well. So at the end of the novella, Scrooge has completely transformed into a philanthropic and altruistic individual rather than a misanthropist. This notion is made clear when it says, I am as light as a feather, I am as happy as an angel, I'm quite a baby. Scrooge has changed his outlook and his behavior. This is the denouement of the story. Now that is really good as well, because I've spoken to you in English language videos. If you've not seen those, check those out, that the stories of any story is written in effectively 5 parts. It's called Freytag's pyramid, or Aristotle's tragic plot, or plot line. So you start with exposition, then you go into rising action, then you get a climax, then you have falling action, and then you have denouement. So there is a denouement, which means the tying up of the story. So the tying up of the story here, it reaches, as it reaches the end, being able to, her to understand that she knows where it is in the narrative arc is really good. Again, level 9. The series of similes and cliches show how light-hearted Scrooge has become in his new attitude. On a whole text level, there is a real contrast between the heavy laden vocabulary used in stave 1 and the simplistic choices here. This contrast frees the reader and could be a linguistic transformation as the novella progresses. The anaphora of I am shows deep pleasure and excitement at feeling different. The word light suggests that Scrooge feels free as a result of his encounters with the ghosts. In chapter 1, Marley's ghost told him he had a heavy coil weighing him down. Now he feels light, which suggests he's relieved to have avoided Marley's fate. Quite a baby could be metaphorical and represent the rebirth Scrooge has had. The noun baby symbolizes the innocence and purity that should always remain in the world. Baby could also be symbolic of Christ, a baby who came to save the world in the same way the transformed Scrooge can begin to change the world with his renewed presence and commitment. So in the same way that this page that we just read was all very AO3 heavy, but beautifully written context, this is beautifully written AO2 out the wazoo, right? So you've got so much thorough, deep analysis. Now, again, as I said, I personally would recommend that you mete out AO1, 2, and 3 a bit more evenly. She's basically done a big chunk of AO1 in her intro, a big chunk of AO2, and then a big chunk of AO3, and then now another big chunk of AO2. But I will say it's an incredibly impressive essay. It is beautifully well written. So that's also the whole way through this, we've had AO4. So the quality of written communication is beyond expectation at GCSE. there's no way that I would expect any GCSE student, even top level GCSE students, to write this beautifully. She's writing at, honestly, a low university level. It's even beyond A level, in my opinion. Certainly good A level standard. So what has she done here? She's broken down this quote, "I'm light as a feather, happy as an angel, I'm quite a baby." She's broken it down thoroughly. She's talked about how it's the denouement of the story, and so it's satisfying that we reach this ending point. She's talked about how this language juxtaposes the language in stave one, the heaviness of that, the heavy coil, the heaviness of the words, the heaviness of Marley's chains as a ghost, are lifted up through the lightness of the simile, the positive nature of the angel, the connotations of the baby, right? And then at the very end, we get just a little bit of possibly linking to reader response, because the Victorians, as I said multiple times, highly Christian nation. So the idea of a baby, purity, Christ, Christianity, she's starting to go a little bit into AO3 here at the end, but just a beautifully analysed piece. I could go on, but I don't have time to. So let's read to the end and wrap up. So alternatively, I think that should be a comma. It could be argued that Scrooge's transformation is artificial, as he only changed due to the ghost of Christmas yet to come and his sighting of his grave. Additionally, it is particularly striking that Dickens paid his own illustrator to portray the ghost as pagan figures. Dickens is promoting beliefs which predate Christianity. Perhaps he's suggesting that the need to be good to each other is a human need. He has done this in order to show his audience that they need to fulfill this need by being supportive to one another as well as the impoverished. So this bit here, again, just pushes her essay up one extra notch. What she's done is she's tried to play devil's advocate. She's tried to look at a counter argument. She's tried to explore a different interpretation. So looking at different interpretations of literature is a level 9 trait as well. So she hasn't just said it's definitely Christianity, it's definitely this interpretation. She's gone a bit deeper and said, well, it could also be this interpretation. Maybe it's not a Christian thing. Maybe it's more of a humanistic thing. Yeah, she puts that in as an option. In conclusion, Scrooge's change in persona could perhaps be representative of what Dickens felt was the real Christianity, rather than using it to conceal and hide ignorant views and behaviour. Perhaps Dickens wanted his readers to realise that Christian faith is not enough, and instead realise that we need actions now, in the present, to look after the welfare of the poor, rather than relying on a merciful God to welcome the poor dead into heaven. So it's a strong conclusion. It's challenging of the views of the Victorian era. It links to the reception part of context. So her conclusion also has some good ideas for AO3. Reception novella by the Victorian audience, which is fantastic. So hopefully that's helpful. As you can see, there's loads of really good quotes and ideas in here about transformation. Hopefully going through that with me and reading it helps you understand how you would write a transformation essay. And hopefully it helps you generally with essay writing. So just remember some of the common principles here. Let's just write some of this down to conclude. So we'll change this title to, "What has she done?" I'm going to get rid of, well, actually, you know what? I kind of like the transformation thing as well, because the words have transformed into a butterfly. So what are the traits of what she's done? So strong points and ideas throughout. Shows a clear, a sophisticated understanding of the text, the characters, and how both develop. She not only uses good quotes, but she goes into painstaking analysis of those quotes to explain what they mean or their deeper meanings. She not only uses context, but actually explores how that context would have been received by the Victorians and how this novel may have challenged the thinking of the time. And it's beautifully organized and written overall. Well punctuated, very good vocabulary. My one comment would be, consider breaking the paragraphs up into more spread out or more equally spread AO1, 2, 3. But it's not essential. There's nothing in the mark scheme. In the same way, there's nothing in the mark scheme that says you have to have an intro and a conclusion. There's nothing in the mark scheme that says you have to have a nice bit of AO1, AO2, AO3 in every paragraph. All the mark scheme says is you need AO1, AO2, AO3 overall. So as long as you've done really good AO1, AO2, AO3, it's okay. I personally just think that breaking it up so you have a strong point, well analyzed, then the context that goes with it in each chunk, in each paragraph, I just think that that reads better overall. But I still would, as I said, if this came to me for moderation and someone said, I think it's a 40 out of 40, I just want you to check, I would definitely not mark this down. I would happily give this essay full marks. So that's all we've got time for today. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, please comment down below. I will see you in the next one. Thanks very much, everyone.